who saved Star Trek, Mr. Nicholas Meyer. Mr. Myers, it's wonderful for me to be here with you. I'm just going to ask a couple of questions, then we're going to open it up for a Q&A session. The more militaristic field, how much of your influence was that?
It was all my influence.
And can we show some appreciation for that? Because with Star Trek, the motion picture it was plodding along. It was more of a sort of like a Brainiac type movie. The fans wanted more action with Star Trek.
The French film director Robert Bresson said, "My job is not to find out what the public want and give it to them. My job is to make the public want what I want." When I got involved in Star Trek, I didn't know much about it. I'm no one to criticize the first movie, because surely they went where no man has gone before. And I could form impressions about what I did or didn't want to do on the basis of the risk-taking that was taken by other people. What I loved about Star Trek when I was first exposed to it, which was not when I saw it on TV, because I didn't, but when they showed me the movie and showed me some of the episodes, and I was reminded of a series of English novels that I read as a kid about Captain Hornblower, who was a Napoleonic era English Royal Navy sea captain. And I thought, well, this is Hornblower in outer space. And so the entire sort of nautical influence to which you referred descended from that idea. I can't remember your question.
It was not only the nautical film, we actually felt like you're on the submarine. It was very much, if I can say, it was very similar to Das Boot. Very similar to Das Boot, the German film.
Yeah, they ripped me off.
You was
all the Nazis ripped me off.
You felt enclosed, it was claustrophobic.
It was supposed to feel claustrophobic. I never understood. Is there a tremendous echo here? Can you hear what I'm saying? I never properly understood why the interior of the Enterprise resembled a Holiday Inn. And I didn't get why they were in pajamas. There was a lot of things I didn't understand. So in trying to recast the world of Star Trek in my own imagination, which I was free to do because no one was stopping me, I did try to take everything and make it more claustrophobic. I think Mr. Roddenberry always felt that the Federation, the Starfleet, was sort of like the Coast Guard. I thought it was more like the Navy. And it was sort of clear to me that what was going on was a species of gunboat diplomacy in which somehow what we used to call the white men, but will now call the Federation, knows best. In Star Trek VI, I carried the idea even further in terms of claustrophobia.
Okay, we're going to open the Q&A session now, so has anybody got a question? There's a guy right there in the front. I'm going to jump down, bear with me.
Hello.
Hi.
What was I sometimes hear about the first movie, Paramount weren't too happy with it, and sometimes I hear they were happy with it because it made them enough money. So when you came on board Star Trek, what was Paramount's vibe about the whole franchise? franchise? Did that put any pressure on you, and any other side bits you can remember about when you first went onto the project?
The acoustics here are sort of dreadful. I'm sorry. Are you asking me if I had any instructions from Paramount?
Any instructions, but also what was their, vibe to you? Like, this is our last chance, please help us, or oh, it's fine. Just
Okay. Simply put, the first movie, whatever one thought of it, still made money. And Paramount's feeling was that they would try to make another movie. There were t-shirts that said at one point, we're going to do it till we get it right, or something like that. They weren't going to throw anything like the budget of the first movie at the second film. I don't think there was at that point any thought of, quote, rescuing the franchise. It certainly never occurred to me. I was just in charge of making this movie, and that's all I set out to do. What was nice about my experience, and it was a wonderful experience, was that I got to work with a whole bunch of really wonderful and very nice people. I was a total stranger to it. The cast made me feel welcome, and I had a free hand. No one was telling me what to do. That doesn't happen very often, not outside my house. So it was very enjoyable to sort of dream the whole thing up from scratch and say, okay, let's just start over here. And I think part of the fact that I'm sort of a flat-footed person, that I always began by saying, well, why are they always doing this? And how come they're in pajamas? And why do they say negative when they mean no? And does anybody ever read a book in this show, in this world? I guess we all read them on Kindles now, except me. And I was just wandering around my own bookshelves when I pulled The Tale of Two Cities off the shelf and said, can't they read a book? And I picked the only book where everybody knows the first and the last lines, and that was just sort of happenstance. But there were no instructions. There was no franchise. There was no thought of that until they saw the finished film. And then it was like, are we really sure we want to kill Spock? I said, yes, I'm sure. That's what we did. We made the movie. And I was not thinking with a monetary hat on at all, as you can probably tell, because I thought, wait a minute, a lot of people care deeply about this person. You mean this is going to be a dry hustle? And it's like, oh, no, he's not really, so I was fighting that tooth and nail, but maybe I was wrong. Okay, do we have another question?
Yeah, there's some people over there.
I suppose just on the subject of rebooting the franchise from the first film to Wrath of Khan, and then we look at what's happened with Into Darkness, working with Ricardo Montalban, delivering those fantastic Shakespearean lines. How did it feel for you, having directed and pretty much recreated the Star Trek franchise, to see that vision reimagined again by J.J. Abrams?
Just to be specific, what Khan is saying is not Shakespeare, it's Herman Melville, it's Moby Dick. Those are his real pecs. We have to always answer that question. That's the real him. I have known JJ since I used to read him bedtime stories. I was at his bar mitzvah. And he is a lovely kid, and I just did this Houdini miniseries in America with his dad, with whom I've been partnered for 100 years. Having said all that, it was hard for me to understand the world the Star Trek world that JJ is depicting. I I didn't think Spock goes around slugging the shit out of people. I don't think that was the same world. When they say this isn't your grandfather's Star Trek, I'm not yet a grandfather, but it was hard for me to understand it. I think JJ's filmmaking skills are entirely enviable, and I admire them. But it was the film that was hard for me to understand in terms of the Star Trek that I knew, and maybe that just makes me old.
Okay, another question? Or just there.
Hi, I read recently in an interview you seem to have quite a good relationship with Leonard Nimoy, especially for developing Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. So I was just wondering if you had any particular memories or anecdotes about working with Leonard.
Can somebody, I heard something about Star Trek VI and a relationship, but I didn't hear with whom.
Any particular memories about working with Leonard Nimoy?
Star Trek VI came about with a conversation between myself and Leonard Nimoy. Paramount wanted to make another film with the original cast. He asked me if I had any ideas. I never have any ideas. But I went for a long walk with Leonard, and this was, I guess, around 1989 or 1990. The wall had just come down in Berlin, and he said, you know, the Klingons have always been our stand-in for the Russians. I said, some of my best friends are Klingons. Anyway, he said, what if the wall comes down in outer space? Who am I if I have no enemy to define me? Which I think is an interesting question. You may remember that the conservative philosopher at Harvard, Francis Fukuyama, wrote an essay after the wall came down, wondering, have we reached the end of history? And that became the central catalytic conceit for this last Star Trek film. It was made on a very, very tight budget, tighter than any of the others proportionally. And it's funny about the movie, watching it now, I think it's a good movie, but there's one aspect of it that does give one pause, which is at the end of the film, Kirk says people can be very frightened of change, as indeed we can. But the film looks somewhat smug in a way that it envisioned at the time a brave, new, improved world. We were no longer eyeball to eyeball with the Soviet Union, with mutually assured destruction if anybody used these god-awful weapons, but is now an improvement. It's a question that must be asked, because instead of the brave new world that I think the movie was celebrating, we have a world that may not be so new and improved, where the nuclear bomb will be in a suitcase instead of in a missile silo. So it's my memories of it are sort of blended, if you like, with a certain self-consciousness about the way things have turned out so far.
Okay, our next question was from this lady there.
Hello there. Before The Wrath of Khan was released, I remember reading somewhere that there had been alternative endings filmed.
Never.
No? So I was going to ask you what they were, but obviously they weren't. Yes, it was in a newspaper. It said there'd been two.
Oh, wow. Was it in a Murdoch newspaper?
The British newspaper, so...
Say no more.
So there wasn't. Right. Thank you, that answers it.
Okay, next question. We're not having many from over this side. Oh, that gentleman there.
Hello. What was your working relationship with Gene Roddenberry like?
My working relationship was very, very slight. But it's funny, you know, when you ask people about their memories of things that happened years and years ago, you know, trial lawyers and policemen will tell you that eyewitnesses are the least reliable witnesses. My memory, for example, of Gene Roddenberry as it relates to The Wrath of Khan was that, oh yes, I was introduced to him, I met him, and that was about it. Subsequently, I was at the University of Iowa Library where my papers are collected, and I was shown an entire file of correspondence between myself and Gene Roddenberry over the screenplay that I wrote of The Wrath of Khan, in which we were arguing back and forth. If you think of the Star Trek, I hate to use the word franchise, but the Star Trek world as a bottle of a given shape into which different writers and directors have poured their own vintage, then I think, and a lot of writers over the years of various series and directors have done this. I think for some reason the vintage that I was pouring in was distasteful to Gene Roddenberry. I think he had an optimist's view of human destiny and where things would go, and I did not share that view, and I think he took exception in one form or another. He took an even graver exception to Star Trek VI, where the crew of the Enterprise was depicted as bigoted in relation to the Klingon species. This was very painful to him. We didn't work together during the course of making either of the 3 films that I worked on. But I did have encounters with him before going to work when he reviewed the scripts of all of them. And, you know, I don't think he was happy. I think he was happier when he saw the finished films. I think he was happier with Khan, and he was happier with Star Trek VI, which he saw shortly before he died. And he sort of, I was given to understand that he changed his mind when he saw the finished thing. A lot of times, when you hear about something in theory, it doesn't sound so good, or it mightn't sound so good. And then you see how it's actually done, because it's all about in the doing. That's what art is about. It's about execution, how you did it, whether you did it right. Before Spock was killed in this movie, I got threatening letters from people saying, if Spock dies, you die, and whatever, helpful things like that. And I said, look, the question is not whether Spock is killed, but whether he's killed well, whether his death seems organic, part of the story, makes sense, has meaning. Otherwise, it just looks like, you know, an arbitrary thing that somebody, you know, did to get a rise out of somebody. It becomes manipulative. All art is manipulative, but we don't want to know that we're being manipulated. And I think the reason that people accept the death of Spock is because it's part of the story, and it works. Had it, you know, been perceived as something else, I think people would have thrown things at the screen, but to date, no one's ever done that. Next question.